He didn't have a clue what was going to happen. And you should be safe in your own castle, and he wasn't.
A brutal killing.
He was a great father and a good husband.
This was premeditated, it was planned.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
He didn't want us to know that they were sleeping together.
I think he was Mr. Gigolo.
He was a career criminal. He's been known to shoot people before.
The truth will be revealed.
He finally said, look, I'm not killing nobody, but I'll hook you up with a guy who will.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. It's a searing summer day in Addis, Louisiana.
Addis is a growing community. It started off as a very small little town, but has grown. A lot of people that are moving in there with children.
But residents of this usually quiet town are in for a horrific shock.
West Baton Rouge 911. Oh my God, help me. Somebody's in the bed, there's blood smearing here. Somebody's in my house, I just walked in the door. Oh my God, I got here.
First responders arrived on scene and cleared the home to make sure no suspects were still present.
Close behind are Detective William J. Starnes and investigator Richie Johnson.
As we made our way to the bedroom, that's when we made our first contact with Monique Kitts. Monique was screaming, and we tried to talk to her, but she was not very audible when she answered us back.
In the bed is Monique's husband, Corey Kitts.
We could tell something major happened because of the blood.
Corey was shot 3 times. And one of the shots severed his spinal cord.
There was blood on the comforter. There was blood all along the side of the bed, down onto the ground. A large portion of that blood had just slowly leaked out of Corey's body.
He was found laying on his back in the bed as if he had been shot while he was sleeping, with the appearance of no struggle whatsoever.
Corey's wife, Monique, along with their daughter Dory and son Corey Kitts Jr., are removed from the scene.
Corey Kitts Jr., he was traumatized where he just didn't even acknowledge anything. Dory, I think she was kind of fighting with the thought of, is he dead or is this something that's not really happening? Monique, she was constantly babbling. Something tragic happened to her, and she's very distraught over it. We interviewed her. She said, I didn't really have any enemies.
By all accounts, Corey Kitts was a likable guy. The neighbors liked him. His family liked him. His in-laws liked him. He was a great father, good worker, good provider.
The people that he dealt with, they said if he needed money and he had it, he would give it to you. Everybody loved him. He would literally give you the shirt off his back to help you out.
It was just strange. We don't commonly see someone killed in their home in their sleep. That's just not normal for our area.
They examine the house, looking for clues as to the identity of the killer.
The door was unlocked when officers arrived. So there was no way that someone forced their way into the home to commit this homicide. That we knew for sure.
It didn't look like a burglary. Normally, you'd find drawers open, you'd find things tossed around. Laptops, computers, the whole house would have been in a disarray, and there'd have been a lot of stuff stolen. Basically, everything was still in the house.
There was some broken glass. It was a vase that was knocked over. I believe the things that were broken was as the intruder was exiting in a hurry.
So, no forced entry, the closeness of the gunshot. Those are all really personal things.
If it had been a violent struggle with blunt force injury, the list of suspects would be narrowed because of the difference in build and strength. But that this is murder committed by handgun means that anybody is capable of having committed this crime.
There's something here. There's more to it.
You had this guy who was this upstanding guy, everybody liked him, but he's dead. And we need to figure out why.
To solve the case, investigators must unravel Corey Kitz's last 24 hours.
The significance of the 24-hour timeline, those last movements of your victim, are often critical to what happened. They become instrumental in every homicide case to going backwards from there to investigate who, where, when, and why.
We knew that Corey Kitz had been working that evening. He worked the night shift.
He came home from work from the plant that morning, early 5-ish, 5:15 in the morning. No rigor mortis had set in. So his time of death was sometime between 6 in the morning and noon that day. We felt that it had to be someone who knew his schedule.
And that's where you really start looking around, especially at family, friends.
Whenever there's a domestic homicide, whether that be a husband, a wife, you start with the partner first.
You don't call Monique a suspect just because she lived in the house, but you have to include her or exclude her.
They question Monique about her movements that day.
Monique accompanied Corey's sister, Clonice, for a walk at the track at like 6 in the morning.
And Clonice Stewart informed us that she had walked with Monique Kitz that morning.
After her walk, Monique came home, talked with Corey for a few minutes, took a shower, got dressed. He was still watching television at the time when she left.
Then she said she went to her daycare down in Plaquemine.
And when we looked at the neighborhood video, you see the vehicle going out toward the highway, and turning in the direction of Plaquemine.
She had worked her normal business morning hours. We confirmed with video that she did go to a local laundromat and was just coming home with the two kids for lunch on Friday.
That's when she walked in and found her husband dead. So it appeared that she had a solid alibi.
Monique then tells police that when she left the home, her daughter Dory was still there.
When we asked Dory about the time she left to go to work, she said it was around 8:40. She got up, she got dressed. Daddy's door was closed, and that when she left, she went straight on to work at the daycare in Plaquemine. And nothing appeared out of the unusual. She didn't see anything or anyone.
But when asked about the discovery of her father's body, things become muddled.
Some of the answers she gave didn't add up to the ones that Monique would give. And this included about the door. When they got there, her statement was she went to the door and opened it. And when you look at Monique's account, it was she opened the door and that the other two followed. So we had kind of a different scenarios given.
When you have someone who can't remember the details, it can be challenging for investigators in determining whether this individual is telling the truth and they really don't remember, or if they're trying to hide something. I think it takes experienced detective work to discern the two.
We tried to polygraph Dory, but she refused. She wasn't very cooperative. That heightened my suspicions because if you don't have anything to hide, it's pretty indicative of some type of knowledge or guilt.
Detectives scour the neighborhood surveillance video, looking to prove or disprove Dory's account.
It did show her leaving the residence at about the time she said she had left.
But there was another person in the vehicle with Dory.
Detectives questioned Dory Kitts about the mystery man she was with on the morning of her father's murder.
We were able to determine it was Marlon, which was her boyfriend.
Once the police find out that the boyfriend was in the house the day of the murder, he's automatically a suspect. You're going to have to convince the police that you did not do it, because you are immediately a person who has the opportunity to kill him.
When asked to explain herself, she changes her story.
The night before, Marlon had supposed to have gone home. But Dory actually told us that Marlon had spent the night with her.
Why would you lie about having your boyfriend at your house? You might lie to your parents, but why would you lie to the cops? So that was the first indication to me that, maybe we got the suspects right here.
She said Corey did not like Marlon being upstairs in the house when he didn't know he was there.
Corey had made the statement, if he ever caught the person being with his daughter in not the proper manner, that he would do something.
But Dory is adamant that the two of them left the house that morning without incident.
She said she came down the stairs. She kept Marlon to stay up there in case her daddy was awake, and if that door was open, she didn't want him seeing Marlon there, because then there would have been trouble. According to her, the door was closed. She motioned for Marlon to come down and got in the car, left, and she took him to his job and then continued on to her job.
The only way to confirm this is to speak to Marlon.
I think there's a certain tension always between a father and the boyfriend of the daughter. That there is a lack of trust. If they don't like each other, that dislike can lead to hate in some circumstances, and that could lead to one of them wanting the other one dead.
Marlon had told me that he was at home the morning of the murder, that he had an uncle who drove him to his workplace. He told me, he said, I went there, I worked, I didn't see Dory until when we heard about the homicide.
Marlon's denial directly contradicts Dory's version of events.
So that kind of raised suspicions about him.
But we're being careful, of course, at the time that we're talking to him, because he's a suspect. Is he feeding us bullshit?
They convince Marlon to do a polygraph.
There's a reason why polygraph is used in my experience. It is to send messages to the person that you're having interviewed. You don't believe them. Why would you ask me to take a polygraph otherwise?
They would ask him questions like, did you murder Corey Kitts?
Under pressure, Marlon comes clean.
Marlon just basically admitted he spent the night there, but he didn't know anything about the death.
And he passed it, a perfect polygraph where he he was telling the truth.
And a lot of things he probably bumbled off to us were because he was scared.
They didn't want us to know that they were sleeping together. Dory wanted to keep that out of the picture. And that one little lie got both of them to be looked at. She loved her daddy.
Dory then provides detectives with a new lead.
She said, I do know my father had spoke about a red car that was parked across the street a while back that he had never seen before. When he approached, it left and went on out of the subdivision. And that he felt that was something strange about that, and he was warning us to be careful. It was the month prior to the murder.
Police must determine if anyone saw the red car return the day Corey was killed.
Canvases are done almost in radiuses. So you take a short distance around your crime scene. You canvass within that area. Very, very important, because people do see things. You have to find a way to use their information.
A neighbor was found who lived directly across the street. He did see a vehicle in the driveway that morning of the homicide between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. But it appeared to be a silver SUV, not a red car. He said, I was in and out of the house, loading up my vehicle, getting ready to go to work. He said, by the time I did leave, the car was gone. He said, so never paid much more mind to it. It got my vehicle and left for work.
There should have been no vehicle parked in the driveway that morning that didn't belong to a Kitts family member. I mean, everyone's away at work, and Mr. Kitts is in his bed sleeping. No one should have been in the driveway.
We believe whoever was in that vehicle had likely committed the murder.
Police now have a description of a vehicle seen during the window Corey Kitts was killed.
We had this gentleman talking about a silver SUV.
So people are filling in the gap. Why was the car there? Knowing the behavior of the victim, especially any patterns, becomes very helpful.
To determine if Corey was expecting someone at the house that morning, they pull his phone records.
We were looking for any contacts, numerous contacts that he might have had with somebody. We also had a dump done on the phone to see who he might have been texting, pictures that might have given us a clue on what occurred. We found some text messages that were quite revealing.
The messages suggest Corey was involved in several affairs.
We learned that Corey had a pretty extensive extracurricular love life, so he was a man about town, for lack of a better term. It's something you need to look at. It's outside the norm of someone's lifestyle to have these affairs, especially long-term, multiple affairs.
Jealousy is a legitimate motive for murder that clouds the thinking of the individuals involved. Let's say it's just easy to kill someone, get them out of the way so we can carry on our relationship. It's a crime of passion. If you can show me a love triangle, I'll tell you have a potential homicide on your hands.
On closer inspection, one number appears significantly more often than the others.
This might be a lead for us. And we started subpoenaing records on this number.
They trace it to a woman named Lucy Williams.
We end up calling this young lady in, and it basically started off questioning about what was your relationship to Corey Kitts. How did you know him? She finally ends up telling us that they did have an affair, that they were close. They were seeing each other on numerous occasions. She could have found out about one of the other mistresses. Could have probably gotten mad.
Detectives attempt to link Lucy to the car spotted in his driveway at the time of the murder.
Her vehicle was certainly background checked, but it didn't fit the silver SUV.
We never had her around that area around the time of the murder. And we found no motive from her whatsoever. This woman loved him. You could tell in her emotions, she really loved him. She got to a point where she knew that it was never going to be, so they end up becoming what you would consider best of friends. It hurt her when she found out that he was murdered. She had nothing to do with it. So that was another door closed.
But the discovery of infidelity turns attention back to Corey's wife, Monique.
Wife finding out that her husband was doing something that actually just drove her to the point where she couldn't take it no more. That would be reason for murder.
Detectives must determine if she's more than just a grieving widow.
Investigating families are difficult. You have to ask a lot of questions, and you have to realize at the same time you're dealing with the victims, potentially. And one of them could be the killer.
She came in and said, look, you know, I want to make a complaint. I want somebody to take this case over. I can't believe they don't have a suspect. They don't have someone in jail. And you're not solving the crime quick enough. She said something about Dory's boyfriend taking a polygraph. And I said, well, that's interesting because I have one in another room. That's one of the other things I do. Will you take one?
She said, I got to talk to an attorney about that. She didn't want to take it, and that kind of puts up the red flags. Normally, if you're innocent, you're going to say, oh, yeah, gee, I want to prove my innocence here.
But she refused to do it. And that spoke volumes to me.
They look deeper into the dynamics of Corey and Monique's relationship.
She didn't pay the bills. It was always Corey that had to catch the bills. Any of the school's bills, he had to get in there and do it himself. She was more of a spender.
She's broke. Living the dream on the outside, and there's no money.
They discover something even more inflammatory.
Corey Kitts did in fact have a death policy. Monique Kitts was a beneficiary of that policy. We also learned that the death policy would be paid even in the event he was murdered.
We spoke with the insurance company out of New York. They had claimed that 5 days after Corey Kitts' homicide, that a Monique Kitts was calling, trying to get the claim on that. Best way I could describe it, you saw the smoke, and you knew there was a fire, and that sooner or later, the flames were going to break.
Police now believe Monique Kitts has motive for killing her husband, Corey.
I absolutely believe that she was involved. But she had an alibi that we couldn't ignore. You could probably exclude her as the person who did the actual killing, but not as being involved, because she could have hired someone.
It's an outlandish theory, but would explain Monique's potential involvement.
Monique Kitts' cell phone records were subpoenaed. It enabled us to track her movements the day of the murder, as well as her correspondence before and after.
They focus their attention on who she was speaking to during that time.
The police can determine down to 5 or 6 yards of where you were at any given time by tracing your cell phone. So if you're an innocent person, all you got to do is hand over your cell phone, and most of the time, you'll be cleared of that charge. If you're a guilty person and the police seize your cell phone, they can put you at a location at a specific time.
When investigators were able to pull all the phone records together, some of the conversations were between her and a man called David Johnson. And there was thousands and thousands of contacts between them. It was such an astronomical number that even the investigators were like, this is crazy. We've never seen this many contacts between people. David Johnson was the milkman for her child care business in Plaquemine.
We learned they began seeing each other and having an affair.
Monique Kitz's cell phone records indicated there was, in fact, communication between the milkman and Monique on the morning of the murder.
Detectives tracked David Johnson down.
He wasn't too good of a character, and we knew that we were going to get lies from him. He tried to distance himself from Monique. And I asked, why were you constantly calling her? He said, because basically I'm a friend of hers, and I'm just checking to see how she's doing.
We also asked, do you know who did, or did you see who killed, or did you in any way participate in the death of Corey Kitts? He said, I didn't kill him. I don't know what the hell's going on here.
He provides police with an alibi.
David was on his milk delivery route, and we were able to confirm through his cell phone that he was actually on those routes during the time of the murder. So he was excluded as a shooter. But in the phone analysis, there was some three-way communications between David Johnson, Monique, and another person, Carl Howard.
Some of those three-way calls also came on the morning of Corey's murder.
David Johnson was friends with Carl Howard from some years back, and he introduced Monique and Carl. So we sent detectives up to Atlanta, Georgia, where Carl Howard was now living, to do an interview. And one of the things that they observed was that he had a red vehicle. They remembered a red car reported by Corey outside of his home before the murder.
Detectives question Carl on his whereabouts the day Corey is actually killed.
During the interview with Carl, he told detectives that he was in Baton Rouge with his sister-in-law, and he was attending a birthday party for his niece.
Police turned to his sister-in-law to verify his story.
She says, I do not lie for anyone. She said, no, he was not with me. So that kind of blew that little scenario out of the water.
We tracked Carl Howard's cell phone records. They showed that he was, in fact, in Addis, Louisiana, on the day that Corey Kitts alleged to have seen a suspicious red car out front of his house. They also showed that he was in the area the day of the murder, almost to the minute, except for about a 20-minute, 30-minute gap where there's no communication.
This gap of time where his phone is turned off is directly within the time frame of Corey's murder.
So now you have this triangle of Carl Howard and David Johnson and Monique. You have these time frames of telephone conversations and communications can't be explained away.
As they continue to dig into the cell phone records, they make a disturbing connection. Calls made from Howard's phone to that of a violent criminal.
Corey Knox was that number that just showed up out of nowhere and was constantly contacting Carl Howard. Corey Knox was your average career criminal. He's been known to shoot people before.
He ran with local gangster and had a pretty extensive record himself.
With an alleged history of gun violence, police must determine how Knox fits into this crime.
His mother had a vehicle that matched the vehicle that was seen that morning. It was a silver SUV.
And it was just like, oh God, we got a piece of the puzzle in.
At that point, we couldn't say he was a shooter, but he was involved. So now we think we have all the proper puzzle parts, and now we need to put those pieces together.
Police believe they have identified the conspirators behind the death of Corey Kitts, but one key detail remains a mystery.
Basically, we had the roadmap. We had the players, and we had the phone records. We still couldn't tell you who the trigger man was.
In custody, Monique Kitts, Carl Howard, and Corey Knox refused to cooperate. So police turned back to the milkman, David Johnson.
We told him he was gonna probably face charges if he didn't get on board with us and start telling the truth. And he started giving us the more details of what went on.
He outlined the entire deal from day one. He was able to tell us that Monique had confronted him about killing her husband several years back. And he said, look, I played along. Yeah, I took $1,000 from her as a down payment. She kept on and kept on. And he finally said, look, I'm not killing nobody, but I'll hook you up with a guy who will. He mentioned it to Carl Howard, and Carl ended up hooking up separately with Monique, and they hatched this plan to kill her husband. He said there was a down payment of $4,000. And that Carl Howard had made an attempt on an earlier date, and that attempt was foiled. But he said she was hell-bent to have her husband killed.
Using David's testimony, police are now able to construct the timeline of what happened when Carl Howard returned for a second attempt at Corey Kitts' life.
So the morning of the murder, Carl Howard told Corey Knox that his vehicle wasn't running right and he needed a ride over to Addis. Mr. Knox then took his mother's silver SUV and drove up to the Kitts home.
Corey came home after a long night's work and went to bed.
When Dory and Marlon was leaving, Carl Howard and Corey Knox were in the vicinity. They were quite aware of the car that Dory drove, and not to do anything until they were sure that particular vehicle was no longer at the scene.
They parked in the driveway, which coincides with what the neighbor said he saw.
Carl Howard went up to the house, went in, and shot Corey Kitts in the head.
He came back out, got in the car, and they drove off.
Then when he completed her scenario by having her children with her and putting on an act, crying, being distraught.
That is just about as diabolical as you can get. To bring your kids home knowing that your husband would be found dead and your kids would see that. Now that's cold.
It speaks volumes about her and her wickedness, as the only way I can say it. There are some very evil people in this world.
I think the motive in the end with Monique was money. It was greed. It was about money. You should be safe in your own castle. And he wasn't because of Monique.
In March 2013, the three conspirators finally faced charges.
Corey Knox pled guilty to accessory after the fact of those crimes, got a 5-year sentence.
Carl Howard, who did the shooting, and Monique Kitts, they were both charged with conspiracy to commit murder and second-degree murder. Both were found guilty and both received life without parole.
They remain eligible for appeal.
David, for his testimony, he wasn't charged. It was like a big weight lifted off your shoulder. I think the thing that really got to me was the family, Corey Kitts' mother, father, his sisters, all the family that was there. We were standing by them. It's hard to put into words when you could see in their eyes and their expressions that justice had come. I'll never forget, his mother, she said, "You told me you weren't going to quit," and she said, "I knew you weren't." When you have someone tell you something like that, it got to you. It was a dark cloud lifted off of them.